With the light subclasses getting reworked through the year of the Witch Queen, I think it's fair to bring up a few points that I hope Bungie is aware of, because if they are, PvE is hopefully going to change in a couple different ways.
They don't have the resources to be the power fantasy that we're playing with.
What's up everybody, my name is SentinelGray and welcome to the channel. This one is going to be a little bit different than what I normally do, so if you like the video and you want to see more, be sure to hit both the like and subscribe buttons. It'll really help out the channel. Now that we have more information on what the plans are for the light-based subclasses over the course of the Witch Queen's active year, we can start to see and imagine what can be achieved by these changes. Providing us with status effects, both positive and negative, are bound to impact every single aspect of the game in different ways. Like giving the suppress and volatile effects to all three classes is going to open up tons of possibilities for new combinations. And for someone like me, who is absolutely in love with the whole kit of the middle tree sentinel, this is a joy to hear. Being able to turn my hunter and warlock into similar versions of my commander titan are going to do so much for me in terms of playtime with my other classes. Even with the great news that we've been given over these subclass changes, so far there's still a few things that need some attention. And I think Bungie knows this, which might be the reason we had a big game overhaul that happened for Beyond Light. You know, the one that made us re-download the entire game. I'm fairly certain that large-scale PvE changes are on the way. Something that struck a chord with me during the talks about the new light subclasses was the talk about power fantasy. Power fantasy isn't really something you're used to in Destiny. In other games, it's the ability to tackle large groups of powerful enemies with ease and being able to be as powerful as you can possibly make yourself, with as little restrictions as possible. In Destiny, we have a lot of restrictions, a lot of limitations. Being stuck to specific ability trees on nearly every subclass, having the number of enemies that appear on screen barely being more than 10 at a time, and even dealing with enemies that seem far too dumb for the task that they're given. This all mixes into our power fantasy. The thing is, we know we're powerful, we just barely ever have a chance to show it. One of the things I'm talking about is lack of enemy density. If you've watched Dado's videos, you know he goes over and harps on this a few times. For what Bungie wants to try and deliver in the first of the three subclass changes are the effects are what is known as volatile. Volatile, for those of you who don't already know, is already in the game but under a different name, called void detonators. These detonators are solely on the Sentinel Titan's middle tree known as Code of the Commander. As a Commander Titan, you have the ability to place these void detonators on literally any enemy that comes in contact with your void energy. This includes your banner shield if you just want to push through the group. With Code of the Commander, a single punch can easily clear a group of 10 or more enemies depending on how strong you are, or how strong they are. This isn't the problem though. Everything that Commander Titan can do and is not the problem. The problem lies with me being able to do this to only about 5 enemies at a time with how the current density of the enemies are right now. And sometimes I don't even get to do this because my fire team kills 2 of them before any of my grenades or punches land. Now give this ability to 2 other people in the fire team. There are already times in this game where you're fighting for kills with other people and it's an absolute nightmare, which is why a lot of people who farm catalysts for exotic weapons would rather use the throwaway checkpoint than do any activity in the game. If this type of ability is given to other classes and is a widespread thing, then we need the enemies to compensate. Bungie has luckily made strides lately in the astral alignment activity with how many enemies we can have spawn in at once. The final boss fight for the alignment are probably some of the most dense enemy fights in the entire game, but this needs to be seen a lot more often if these changes are going into place. Enemy density will bleed into another point that can be changed, and that's difficulty. No, this isn't the old artificial difficulty argument, this is something completely different. After playing Grandmaster content for a while, there's a few things that stood out to me beyond the power level difference between myself and the enemies, and that's just how accurate and how aggressive they are. We've all seen videos of people trying to wipe on an encounter in the Deepstone Crypt raid, only for them to sit there for about a solid minute just to barely get killed by the enemies around them. This definitely isn't the same for difficulties like Master and Grandmaster. Yes, the enemies hit a lot harder because of the discrepancy in power level, but the AI will barely miss when it comes to hitting their target, and the weapons that take arcing projectiles like boomers or grenades will always hit their mark in that level of difficulty. Essentially, enemy density will definitely increase the difficulty of the game as a whole, because we'll have a lot more enemies to deal with on a normal basis, but also making the AI more aggressive and accurate will really let those builds that people make come out to shine. We have two different negative status effects that impact an enemy AI's weapon. Because of this, I could see enemies becoming more accurate as they are in either like Gambit, Master, or Grandmaster Nightfalls. I'd even go as far as to say allowing them to hit harder would be even better. Take a look at Gambit. The enemies in Gambit are wired in a completely different way and they hit harder on purpose. Bungie could take some of that into consideration too. They could take every little thing that usually makes a game more difficult, like enemy aggression, accuracy, damage, and all factor that into the more difficult parts of the game. That way, Grandmasters don't always have to be about sitting back and plinking away at an enemy. Now that we have unlimited primary ammo, that type of strategy, if they stick with the current way that Grandmasters work, is going to be much more viable, and I would much rather just sit in the back with a scout rifle and just take my time because it's the easy way out. Instead, they can be all about your build and how you use it. Preventing enemies from hitting you or even firing their weapon can go a long way with enemies that are extremely accurate. Take a look at any of the snipers in the higher difficulties. I feel this can be used as a scaling effect in the number of difficulties like we have. Start out with just the sheer enemy density and scale up by adding different enemy behaviors. As an example, your normal everyday strikes can just have the enemy density added to them, so that you don't have to always fight for kills. Nightfalls can have all three of those things which I stated. They can scale per difficulty and end with Grandmaster enemies being many, aggressive, and accurate. This alone would already serve to make the game focus more on buildcraft than burn down the bullet sponge. The final thing I want to talk about is more of a hope, it's not a prediction, and that is some sort of firing range or testing site or training camp or something. Back in Season of Opulence, we had the Trophy Hall, which proved to be an extremely valuable resource whenever it came to things like testing damage for weapons and all of that. I say go a step further. The TWAB that talked about the Void subclass changes also made mention to Destiny build crafting, which makes it seem like they very much support the idea of leaning into that type of thing. If that's the case, then let us test our builds. Don't make it so that the only way to test is to go into Sorrow's Harbor just to try and fight with other players to see the potential our builds could have. Give us something to spawn all types of enemies and as many as we want. Of course, within reason. This would go a long way for the player base, just being able to have a way to test things, even something as small as a new weapon we get from an activity. Instead of going out to the EDZ or loading up the Vault of Glass to test it out, we can go to the testing facility that is set up expressly for that purpose. Basically, what I'm getting at here is Bungie isn't stupid. They know that if they make us any more powerful, they're going to have to compensate one way or another for that. And since they seem to be making us a lot more powerful just by the reworks for the Void subclasses alone, then it's fair to say that we're probably going to get changes to PvE soon. The thing is, I don't think what I'm saying here is going to be too far off. Yes, we are going to be fighting the Lucent Brood in the Witch Queen, but it's going to take more than that to threaten Guardians who, as we like to very so often put it, have killed literal gods. Hopefully, I've given you something to think about and maybe even prepare for in the future. Tell me how you feel about this in the comments down below, though. Would you be for or against these changes and why? But thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. And remember, keep your heads up and be kind to each other. Bye now.